Good afternoon, everybody. John Black coming to you from Anzac House. For those I haven't met, I've been the Chief Executive here for just on 12 months. It's my first webinar in this role, and certainly it indicates to me the technology is certainly within our membership, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to participate in this session this afternoon. It is about receiving members' feedback on the strategic plan. I'd like to emphasise that it's important that we recognise it is the members' plan. Very proudly, the RSL is a member-based organisation, and in terms of setting our future direction, it is so critical that we receive the feedback from our members. Regrettably, COVID-19 has had a big impact on the project. Initially, those who were participating in the Congress last year down in Albury would realise that the aim was to have the implementation of a new strategic direction underway in July of this year. Sadly, we've had to really curtail our ability to seek members' feedback because of the obviously the restrictions we have in meeting with people and receiving that feedback. Nonetheless, I will cover later in the presentation where we're at in terms of the timeline, but I guess we also need to acknowledge now that we're in election season, and we need to respect that as the board has to make decisions regarding the strategic plan with one mind and certainly one eye on that particular outcome. So this afternoon, I'm being assisted here in Anzac House by Mon, who's helping me with the production. But as importantly as that is also helping me receive your questions as they arise so I can respond to them as we progress the webinar. Okay. So the purpose this afternoon, as I've outlined, is to receive your feedback, and also importantly is enable us to complete a final strategic plan that we can present to the board for approval. And in doing so, I need to be mindful of my responsibility to advise the board how the plan will be funded. And I'm sure that will come up for discussion this afternoon. But first and foremost is to receive your feedback, and I look forward to doing so as we progress through the presentation. At the end of the presentation, I guess in terms of a call to action, is I'll be seeking people's willingness to provide their views in writing back on the strategic plan email address that I'll show you shortly, because it's through that process I'll be able to, as I said, complete the final plan and also advise the board on what the members are thinking and what the members are saying. So the scope this afternoon is I will cover some background. I won't dwell on that for too long, but I think there's a couple of key assumptions that underpin the plan that I need to explain. In terms of the brief overview, I won't go into every single initiative in the plan. I will try and focus on the core elements of what's proposed in the plan to make sure that it provides an opportunity for people to provide their feedback. As well as doing that, I will touch on the proposed funding model. As I said before, being able to fund the implementation is critical, and again, we need the members' feedback on that, and obviously the members' support in terms of our future direction. Finally, as well as be very happy to take questions as we go through the presentation, but to at the end open up for a general discussion. And certainly we'll be able to publish the questions and then obviously listen to my responses as they come forward. Okay, now into the background. A number of you will recall that Social Ventures Australia was actually engaged by Anzac House to do some quantitative and qualitative research in 2018, 2019. I presented the outcome of that research at the Congress last year, and a copy of that is on the website, and I'll touch on the website shortly. But that research was very important because it underpinned a lot of the case for change And I think we understand that it's important to rely on as many facts as we can to build the reason why we have to change, but also respond to what the members said through that research. The second dot point there about Congress, I was brand new to the league, and what I was able to do though was to take my own research into that forum and test a couple of key assumptions with the audience. The two assumptions that we're able to validate was first and foremost that overwhelmingly, and it was a unanimous decision, that the members wanted to remain a member-based organisation. As I said, I think that's uniquely positions the RSL. We've got a proud heritage of being a member-based organisation, and there was absolute will to continue that. The second assumption that was validated was that we want to remain a charity. Now, this is really interesting because I was able to explain what the pros and cons are of being a charity, particularly a member-based charity. And that is, in the law of the land today, the regulator has clearly stated that a member cannot obtain a benefit from the charity to which they belong. Now, we're a little bit different. That is, our service members who have served are veterans. That is our charitable purpose, to support veterans and their families. And therefore, if you are a veteran in need, and I stress that a veteran in need, you quite legitimately can obtain a benefit from the charity. So those two assumptions, as I said, have been validated at Congress and underpin the plan, the draft plan as presented. The other thing I'd say about Congress was the overwhelming feeling I had from the membership or the delegates at Congress. There was this still an element of distrust in our leadership at the head office as a consequence of the Bergen inquiry and also the investigation by the ACNC. I have taken that on board, and our board has also been very focused on that in rebuilding that trust, and I think it's time to move on. There's no doubt the transparency we've been able to express from Anzac House, whether it's through the finances being on the website, information like the board communique, making sure transparency is a principle we follow to build the trust and confidence in the membership. Because as we're about to see in the plan, it revolves around us working as one in New South Wales and collectively delivering our mission of supporting veterans and their families. The third dot point around the preparation, or the case for change, you will see in the front of the strategic plan there's a summary page there of what is the case for change and why do we want to set a strategic direction for the RSL in New South Wales. There's a number of things there. One, it was quite prominent from the research, was the age profile. If I take us a year forward from Congress last year, the average age of our membership is now 78, and we only have less than 1,000 members under the age of 55. So it's a critical area, and as a member-based organisation delivering our charitable purpose, obviously we need to renew and encourage people to join. So that's a critical thing. A question that probably still hasn't been answered specifically yet is it was unclear at Congress that we knew what we stood for. What is the pitch we say about the RSL? What do we stand for? And that's something that we must make sure is clear in the new strategy, and we have a very clear narrative about that one we can proudly talk about to friends and family, and more particularly the wider veteran community who are not members of the League. Brand confusion, very prominent in the research. Over 98% of respondents thought the RSL was a club, and that's probably been taken anecdotally as well. There's no doubt our community, when they see RSL or hear RSL, they think of club, premises, logo, sign, beer, palmies, pokies and the like. Now we know that there's a distinct difference between the sub-branch and its function as charitable function and the club. That's something we need to address and address promptly. Since since I was serving, so over 15 years ago, we've seen now the proliferation of other ex-service organisations, Soldier On, Bravery Trust. heroes, wounded heroes, and the like. There is, according to DVA, over 5,000 other registered charities that have supporting veterans as their purpose. I think it's happened because, quite frankly, the RSL hasn't been prominent in what we stand for, what we do, and why we're there to support veterans, and that needs to be addressed in the plan. There is also quite a misunderstanding, and certainly not a consistent understanding across the League, about services to support veterans. One of the great things that, of course, we provide as the RSL, and something which I'm immensely proud of, is mateship or camaraderie. Being a member-based organisation, I think that's something that we need to really build upon to build strength in the organisation and provide a point of difference from these other ESOs. I've also called out about Rsl Leadership, and I think when certainly I left the services, I didn't know there was such thing as a sub-branch after serving for 25 years. I guess that's not good. So, you know, what is the RSL doing in terms of leadership across the ESO sector? We've got immense resources, and I think it's important that we mobilise those resources to our charitable purpose collectively and collaboratively, and that's what this plan is suggesting we do to address that case for change and really reassert the RSL as the dominant leader in supporting veterans. It should be the first three letters that come into people's mind when they're serving, and then obviously when they're transitioning out of our services, they think, RSL, that's where I go, that's where I get support, and that's where I can get help. It's also where I can have friendships and enjoy my life. I call out about the inequities across the RSL in New South Wales in terms of wealth. That's manifested, generally speaking, through the change in vagaries around real estate property values through those clubs, the sub-branches, I should say, that have divested ownership of clubs over the last 20 years in particular. And what we see now is an imbalance, particularly between the metropolitan and the regional areas. It's something that's a fact, but it's also, in my view, an opportunity for us to actually, as I said, mobilise those resources for our charitable purpose collectively. I do call out the issue that gets raised in every sub-branch consultation. I think I've been over 90 sub-branches now across New South Wales, and that is the issue of the arts union or the lottery run by RSL Queensland. There is points there around how do we establish ourselves in a governance sense for the future, and there's a whole section on that in part 7 of the strategic plan and addressing that because, as we know, RSL New South Wales residents, and of course residents more generally, are buying those lottery tickets, and we're seeing the resources not necessarily come back into New South Wales, and money talks. Finally, I think in terms of the preparation of the case for change was the need to understand that we all wear the same badge and therefore we stand for the same things, and the important need for values to underpin the plan. Okay, the draft plan was drafted by yours truly. There's no consultants involved in that. As I said, it's being built through from the survey, the research, the case for change, to set a strategic direction for the RSL to realise its vision and capability. So what I'll do now is just check there's no questions so far. We do have some. Were there any outcomes as a result of the funding model working group? Yes, and I'll come to that later. As you can see on the slide now, where I'm going to now, the second dot point from the bottom there, how do we fund it? So I will come back to the funding working group because that is important. The next question, will RSL New South Wales support and endorse the VET Chamber of Business Chamber, the VET Business Chamber, and also #BuyVeteran campaign that is being run by the Veterans CBC, that must be the Business Chamber, and the Prince's Trust of Australia. Certainly it's something I am aware of. It's a great initiative to set up an organisation to help veterans set up their own business. So while we often talk about employment of people who've served, assisting them set that up is something that we need to do and certainly look to endorse, has been requested. Next question, how does RSL New South Wales develop, implement and fund a strategic plan that may be heading in a totally different direction to other RSL state branches across Australia? Great question. And concurrently with this is we're working on the national plan, and it is important that we understand the differences between each state, and ultimately, in my view, whilst our strategic plan we're proposing here gets us to work as one RSL in New South Wales, the obviously strategic intent is to work as one nationally. In particular, we need to work nationally, recognising it as a national brand, and also the punch that we can bring to bear in terms of influencing government policy if all the state branches are working as one. I've mentioned one challenge already, and that is the Queensland lottery, and there's quite a bit of information on our website about that, but we've been very open with Queensland about that. We have understood the situation that we face, and there is an option, of course, of RSL in New South Wales plugging into the RSL headquarters in Queensland as an interim step as we move towards a national organisation. That said, the reason you'd say that is currently, for instance, in our Anzac House here in Sydney, we've got just on 19 staff. Corresponding state branch in Queensland has 280 staff or thereabouts, to give you an idea of the capability they can generate on the back of the income from the lottery. But by and large, the two key elements we need to, in terms of focus nationally, is around the brand and the brand management, what the RSL stands for, how veterans can be helped by the RSL, and of course that very critical point I mentioned about lobbying and influencing particularly the federal government in the process. Okay, let me move on now. So what I'm going to do is do a quick website tour. Then, as I said at the start, I'll do a quick brief overview of the plan, and perhaps you might then come back to me about other important initiatives that you might see that I have not spoken about, and then I'll talk more about getting into the funding and how we implement. Right, now I'm going to try my technology wizard skills here and bring up the live website. So now this is opening of the landing page. I look forward to the day that internal information is not on the landing page, but the RSL New South Wales website is actually focused on the external audience that we're targeting. So stand by for that change. Now, obviously, at the moment, strategic plan development is quite prominent. You can open it up, and I'll just scroll down. There's some introduction comments, and then providing input. The copy for consultation, which I'll come back to, is there. There's also if you like, the CFO version, the cheap version of the plan as well. It's black and white for printing. This is the address where you need to send your feedback, the strategic plan at rslnsw.org.au. We're really encouraging members and sub-branches and representatives to send their feedback. As I said, that's critical for us to build this plan. Member consultation so far. The issue of going out to sub-branch is critical. I'm still on the road a little bit. It has obviously curtailed because of COVID. But if a sub-branch finds it difficult to host an event, Maroubra sub-branch has been very generous, and there are some funds there to host an event if you wish to. Click here. This is the member input received so far. You can go in there and have a look who's provided feedback. There's quite a lot on there. Strategic plan budget. A lot of people ask how much does it cost, etc. Now it's over $20 million over the 5 years is the estimate, and if you open up, and I won't dwell on this, but you can see the detail of each initiative, what the outcomes are, and when and over which phasing they would be implemented, and the total costs. There's been some conjecture around those estimates of cost, but certainly I think it's a good basis on which to start, and the members certainly should be aware of the approximate cost and commitment of making the changes that are proposed. I mentioned before around the options regarding our organisation, that's in goal 7, and there was a particular consideration by our board around different models, whether or not we decentralise, we centralise, etc. And the outcome of that is in terms of detail, is available here on the website as well. And the strategic plan is very much focused on consolidating as RSL New South Wales in the first instance and making us work collaboratively in New South Wales. There are many disadvantages of decentralising, and certainly in the environment we have today with so many competing ESOs, it really does diminish the ability for us to really collect our resources and work together collaboratively in the interests of veterans and the community. That's, I mentioned before, around some of the research and background is loaded there on the website as well. Okay, now what I'll do now is look at the plan itself. So I'll go back into that, open up the version of the plan, and I'll quickly scroll down. The case for change, I've spoken about that in outline. I think importantly, if you do get an opportunity to read what success will look like, this is a descriptor of if we implement all 49 initiatives in the plan, that's what we'll look like. And we're really standing out there at the front is across all New South Wales, people in our communities know what we stand for, what we do, and they will see that we are the leader in terms of providing services, and we've got a younger membership. So scrolling on down, you can see critically the purpose. I've mentioned that a few times around supporting veterans and their families. Now it says here, talks about access to services. Now I'll talk a bit about that because in general sense, our membership are not providing technical services, but we're linking people to those services. But one of the things that stands out here is camaraderie and collaboration. I think, as I've mentioned before, the strength of the organisation coming through our membership is really something we need to preserve and really look to, because it really discriminates what we do as a charity compared with these myriad of other veterans charities which are not member based. The vision, obviously there we want every veteran and serving defence member in New South Wales. Now that's probably one and the same, and we can change that, but the definition of veteran has been quite contentious, and we want to make sure that it's the broadest church possible. So people have put on a uniform, classified as a veteran, and they're welcome to join. I think around there is the strength I mentioned about camaraderie, community, really important that and I'll talk about the sub-branch being at the centre shortly, but that's really is about our connection to our community, lifelong friendships, and that's something we treasure from our service time and continuation of that opportunity in an organisation like the RSL. And I said access to those support services. The motto is probably the easiest way to remember the strategic plan about one RSL, but as I talked about just then around the sub-branch at the centre, delivering locally, and that's what it's about. So getting our resources collectively together to deliver locally and consistently across the state. There are 7 strategic goals outlined there to achieve that vision. Those goals are very much based on addressing the case for change, supporting veterans transitioning to civilian life, representing, this is the lobbying, this is the advocacy that I've spoken about, growing the membership, critical. And I guess in terms of feedback so far from the sub-branches, a lot of people are focusing on that. They keep saying, oh, why isn't Anzac House doing something about it? Well, Anzac House would if we had the resources, and that's where this plan comes to, around, as I said, how we pool our resources to effectively engage the broader veteran community and the benefits of the RSL. Goal 4, representing through commemoration. Wow, isn't this important for us to recognise? The RSL is synonymous with commemoration, and there's no doubt in my mind that is being challenged. Challenged, as we've seen by other charities now, demonstrating both through Anzac Day, for instance, with Soldier On, and we're seeing other charities commence now in positioning around Remembrance Day. So we've got to be really conscious of the fact that we are the historical custodians of commemoration. Goal 5, and I was really pleased about that question before about the other state branches. We've got to work as one, and our president at the moment is very much involved with trying to get the RSL nationally to be effective both, as I said, in that lobbying capacity, but also in how we manage our brand and what we stand for. We saw the power of working together at the Anzac Day this year, when regrettably we couldn't march, but we're able to get the very much the light up the dawn service working consistently across Australia, and that was great to see. That was about the state branches collaborating. Goal 6, obviously this is around telling the public the difference between a club and a sub-branch, and it's about what we have to do to present ourselves to the public, and we need to make some investments there, as I said, to make sure the public is aware of the charity and what we stand for and what we do. Goal 7, there's a lot of initiatives in here around obviously the operating model and consistency of support, and that comes back to the fact that we need to be sustainable as an organisation in New South Wales, and that ostensibly comes back to us working together. I mentioned in the case for change the importance of an organisation having values. I have received some feedback, not a lot, on values. I've had members actually question, why do we need values? Well, I'd argue that a lot of younger people, people who've served more recently, are looking for an organisation's values before they consider joining. This is what we stand for, this is what we behave, these are the behaviours we expect of each other. So I think they are important, but I'd appreciate your feedback on these. I won't, as I said, go through all 49 initiatives. As you can see, the structure is very much around the initiatives. The initiatives are to realise the goal, and then a brief description about what success will look like if we actually implement the initiatives. So what I'll do is go to Annex A on the strategic plan, which is a sketch diagram here. And let me describe this because it encapsulates a number of the initiatives across all the goals in a pictorial sense. What does it say? Well, what we are, our purpose is obviously to look after our veteran community and also extend into the current serving people, to make sure they start to understand about the RSL, what we stand for, what we do, to assist them, particularly when they transition from the services, and also support them after their service. This is an important point. In this plan, whilst there's some people proposed in the case for change that we should just simply divorce ourselves from the clubs, this plan says no. The clubs are an important connector. Given the research tells us that our community generally associates the RSL with a club, that tells me that we need to build a very strong relationship with the clubs into the future. I think at the same time that provides a challenge for us, because it was in 1975 that the sub-branch had to separate from the clubs when it was decided in law that the sub-branch could no longer have a liquor licence or a gambling licence, so we saw a separation. I think the issue there comes to this tension we have between being a member of a sub-branch versus being a member of the club, and of course the latter, being a for-profit organisation, is perfectly legitimate to provide membership benefits, and of course on the sub-branch side as a charity, no member benefits. That's something that we have to wrestle through this plan, but certainly it's something we shouldn't put aside. It's something we can work with. But the clubs, as I said, play an important role. When you walk into a club as an ex-serviceman or woman, you get directly connected to the sub-branch that can provide the assistance that may be being sought. So as I said, the sub-branch network is the centrepiece. Obviously the purpose centre is about supporting veterans and their families, but the way it's done is through our sub-branches. The sub-branches are at the centre of what we're doing in the future. And these 4 dot points here represent the key functions of the sub-branch through this plan. Camaraderie I've spoken about, it's really important, I think, and it's something, as I said, differentiates our charity from others because we are member-based. We can certainly provide that mateship, that link to share and support each other at times of need, but also times of fun, and I think that's something we shouldn't lose sight of. Events, I think what we'll see in the detail, you can see about sport and things, and this will become more prominent in the final version because I've had some really good feedback. I'm in the midst of seeking some input now to the way that will run essentially into sub-branch activities, both of a sporting recreation nature, and I understand the concepts of Anzac biscuit competition is already well and truly underway in Parks and Peak Hill and Forbes out there. They're already starting an event. So that's what I want to see. It's about people getting involved in an organisation. Young people don't want to go to meetings. They want to come and participate in things, and that's what we can offer. And also it's a fantastic for veterans to participate. People, not necessarily members, of course, but we can invite them to come and join us in events and activities that involve sport, recreation and other interests. Meetings, yes, we still need to conduct meetings. Perhaps we don't need to conduct as many as we do. As I said, younger people generally don't get excited about meetings, not necessarily also post-meeting activities is not what they're looking for in terms of camaraderie. So we can look to that, but obviously we're governing a significant resources and we have some obligations to meet. Second dot point is probably representing the biggest change from where we are now. And a little bit of background here about what I mean by concierge services. There's no doubt that many of our sub-branches are providing outstanding, say, pension services at the moment to our veteran community. However, I've learned very quickly that those particular individuals are most concerned because they're quite senior in age and there's no one coming up behind them. And the onerous requirements of the ATDP training is meaning we don't have the volunteer base coming through to do that. So what this plan is saying, we recognise we're going to have to transition over the next 5 years to paid pension advocates, and that essentially would be done through our own charity organisation, Rsl Defence Care. In idea of numbers, currently they've got 9 full-time paid advocates supporting across New South Wales, where Queensland's got 59. So give you an idea in terms of where we could be, as I said, over the next 5 years. Similarly, with the ATDP training around wellbeing officers, that's where I envisage here, because what this diagram is representing is this line is below the line represents all the service delivery organisations, and I've noted 450 in New South Wales. I didn't use the 5,000 total that DVA talk about. I'm looking at the charities on the ACNC website that are specifically providing support to veterans. And what we envisage happening is we will build what I call a catalogue of services. And there's projects within the plan to build this and maintain it over time, and that's always a challenge. So that what I'm suggesting here is that as a veteran sponsor, that name might change, the wellbeing support person can connect a veteran in need to this whole myriad of services that are available there, open arms for counselling. We know around the pensions and what's happening within DVA and how hard it is to navigate that particular area. Interesting enough, my former role as the CEO of TAFE New South Wales, we established the Ranks to Recognition program, which is a program funded by the New South Wales government, which recognises that people leaving the service today might not have the civilian equivalent qualifications to what they learn in their military skills. And also, the New South Wales government will fund the gap. Now, it's probably many members don't know that, but this catalogue will have that. We'll train you how to use the catalogue, and we connect veterans in need to the services. So the services that we're providing within the sub-branch environment are more around the connection to these services, but also providing that camaraderie, the fun, etc., which really sets us apart, as I said, from other charities. Also importantly is, I've mentioned commemoration at the start and other community events, that if the centrepiece is around the sub-branch, and historically we've been very much focused on those events. I mean, it is synonymous, the RSL is synonymous with commemoration, and we've got to protect that. So supporting the sub-branches in supporting commemoration. For instance, if you look in the detail and strategic plan, it's around providing common resources that are available to every sub-branch to support their community. And we can do that if we work together. And linking with that is fundraising. You're aware the board has already made the decision that local fundraising, the funds raised remain local. To me, though, it's more than just fundraising. In my view, being out in the local community, being visible in the local community, is connecting the brand of RSL with the commemoration, for instance. So it's not necessarily just about making the money and support the activities of the local sub-branch, it's around a connection of brand. Local veteran services on here. As I said, there are things maybe not represented below the line. As I said, there's over 450, but there might be local initiatives that are funded by this local fundraising, and that's terrific. And we need to preserve that and support each of our sub-branches that are undertaking that. So you can see in that brief overview, conceptually, what we're doing in terms of the future. And it's the projects involved in setting up these activities to support us. Now, obviously, as I said at the start, there are many other initiatives in the plan, but what I'll do now is take a pause before going back to our process, which is around the funding of the plan, and I'll also talk about how we're going to implement it. So let's just take a quick breather and I'll have a look at what questions have come in and I can answer those. All right, I've got one from Coffs Harbour. Has COVID necessitated a change in the strategy or the rollout? Yes, it has. I did mention at the start that we were due to implement from July. At this stage, and I was going to mention this a bit later in the presentation, but I'll do it now, is that I'm due back to the board in October, so only a month and a bit away. So I'm actually drafting the final version of the plan now, so that's important. Now, the issue is to obviously have the final plan. Is the budget for the final plan or the cost of the final plan, and by the way, here's how we're going to fund it, and it's the latter that will provide me a challenge at the moment, and I'll come back to that when we talk specifically about the funding model. What else have we got here? I've done that one. Yeah, I'll come back to the funding working group when I talk about that. I've done that one. Why doesn't RSL New South Wales take away the right of clubs in New South Wales to use the RSL logo brand name? Otherwise, how can you market the difference between the league and the clubs in such a competitive marketplace? If it causes such a negative impact to veteran welfare, when lie allow it to continue? Now that's a really interesting point. I notice it's come from Victoria. In New South Wales, of course, the clubs, as I said, are a legal entity separate from the sub-branch. The issue about branding is a little bit more complex than that, because there's two parts of it. The trademark being managed through separate legislation and the business registration being through ASIC, and many of clubs have had their traditional name, which actually includes in their business name RSL, and that's been through the approval process, so they're legitimately trading with their registered business name. So it is a little bit complex, so I'm probably better off taking some of that offline, but certainly there is groups of younger veterans and the in-service people that we have consulted with regarding the strategic plan like to see the separation between the club and the sub-branch, because they really appreciate and probably didn't understand what the sub-branch does to support veterans, because they associate the RSL with the club instead of the charitable purpose. And that's the big challenge in this plan, about how do we inform the community of the difference. But it's not as easy as disconnecting the brand. And as I said, when I talked about this part of the strategic plan, that the overall majority of feedback from members is we want to keep the clubs in there. They can provide a very good source of funding, and that's something we need to look at as well to support the charity. But maybe there are some things we can change, and I'll be interested in views of members around that. Oh, someone I served with. Hi John, I have grave concerns on recruitment. Do you think this should be the #1 priority and allocate funds on a sustained recruitment campaign? I think, as I think I said, that goal has become quite prominent. And when you look at the initiatives in the goal around increasing membership, it does involve a fair bit of investment. Regrettably, I hear, what's RSL's Anzac House doing about recruitment? Well, unless we fund the strategic plan and do the things that are in that initiative, we won't be able to do that. Now, the other question and challenge we have to give ourselves is the fact is we provide membership to support other people. That's the crux of the matter, moving us away from the club's environment to be part of a charity. You join to give and to support others and support each other. And I think that's something we need to actually better sell, inform people about that. And I'm just very conscious of the fact that it would take more time to explain some of the nuances in there, but I hope I've been able to answer that, because it is critical in this plan that we resource collectively to make sure we can communicate to the broader community, make the changes, and the only way we can do that is work as one. If we don't get the support of the sub-branches for the strategic plan, regrettably we'll see fragmentation continue, and there won't be that consolidated view for general recruitment across all sub-branches. So that's something that I would call out. I've got another one here. Is it likely the current board will approve a final plan prior to the board election, or will they defer to the new board to approve the plan? Good question. I can't speak for the board, but certainly it would be something that would be considered. There's no doubt that every single current board member respects the democratic process of the membership, and as I said, this has been delayed by up to 6 months because of COVID. So, as I said, I can't answer for the board. I'd like to think there are some members of the board who want to say a moment lost now is lost forever, and we really need to think about what we need to implement now, forthwith. The board's already made some decisions. I've mentioned already one about fundraising, for instance, and we've made some significant decisions in the last 6 months around RSL Defence Care as well, and to make sure that we continue to build those services by virtue of our sole membership of RSL Life Care and the resources that can be brought to bear to support Defence Care. So there's some of the things that have happened, but ultimately we need the strategic plan to set the direction. So that's a matter, unfortunately, I can't answer specifically. Next one, board communique 28th of February in the centralised section mentions RSL Queensland, RSL Australia. Why hasn't this option been presented to the New South Wales members? Well, it has. Each consultation I've done, I've called that out specifically. Like everything in communications, you can put out a communique, you can put something on the website, but it's not necessarily going to cut through. And I think it's important to explain. The RSL Queensland strategic plan is to be RSL Australia. I've said they can underpin that by virtue of the National Art Union or lottery, approximately $70 million a year. So it provides an opportunity. I think it's something that, as I've raised, approximately 90 sub-branches I've visited, parochialism is still strong, and without exception, the membership have told me no. We wish to be a strong RSL New South Wales before considering closing down our Anzac House in Sydney and connecting all the sub-branches to the headquarters in Brisbane. So it's an option that's out there, but as I said, it's been discussed at each of the consultations I've been to, and I'll be interested in your views as well, both individually and as sub-branches, if you wish to type in more and provide more feedback on that. As I said, connected to that, I should say, is the decisions of National. Most large charities in Australia have done away with the federated model, whether it's Vision Australia, Alzheimer's Australia and the other big charities, because of the modern world we live in. And certainly in my view, the RSL needs to do that. It is a national brand, but there is some time to move towards that. As I said, at the moment in New South Wales, we're essentially 348 RSLs. This plan is saying let's work together as one, let's come together as one over the next 5 years. There's one thing I should have said in that coming together as one. One of the great parts of the feedback so far is a lot of the other associations, particularly the two Vietnam Veterans Associations, have said they want to come back as part of the RSL, and I think that's fantastic. So you see in the final version of the plan around a strong invitation to bring those organisations, including the RAF Association, things that back in under the RSL, which will add a lot of weight and influence in terms of particularly advocacy and what we stand for as a leader in veterans commemoration, veterans services, veterans support, and of course veterans advocacy, which would be great. Oh, I've just got a comment there. Thank you for saying our own in relation to RSL Defence Care. Yeah, that's really important. I think it has generated a lot of questions about Life Care. Life Care is a charity in itself. It is a not-for-profit business. It is a company limited by guarantee, which is gobbledygook to a lot of people, but what that means is, as a charity, it can't provide any benefits to members. We, as RSL New South Wales, is the sole member of that charity. So it's not a share company, so we don't get a dividend from it. But one of the great things about a not-for-profit company like RSL Life Care is they can invest a surplus, perfectly legitimate to make a surplus or a profit, and reinvest it. So what we're seeing now is a reinvestment into the services of now newly established Veterans Services Division, which includes RSL Defence Care. The role of RSL New South Wales is still important because we appoint the board to RSL Life Care, and we also ensure that its constitution aligns to its objects, and that's what you would have seen over the last 6 months, a realignment to those objects with a focus on veterans and supporting veterans, and it's exciting to see that come through already in a lot of their communications. So that's an important point. Thanks for raising that. Okay, what else have I got here? A note on Annex A mentions ESOs that do not have a membership fee, i.e. mates for mates, soldier on, open arms. My question is, why does an ex-member of the ADF have to pay a membership fee to join the RSL? In the detail of this plan, it's a move by 2023. There will be no membership fees in joining the RSL. There's also an initiative in initiative under 3, goal 3, that talks about current serving people being automatically becoming members of the RSL. Just recently, I've been wearing a hat representing the national level of the RSL in meeting with the highest level in Department of Veterans Affairs and Defence in relation to the new Joint Transition Authority. That hasn't been announced yet by the government. My understanding is that we can expect an announcement through the budget process in the end of the first week in October. But importantly, that's one of the key Productivity Commission outcomes to improve the experience of people transitioning out of Defence and hand it off to DVA. But in the middle there, the Joint Transition Authority has a concept around connecting to the ESOs for an assurance loop that things are going well. I believe that the RSL should be the leader of that ESO group, and that's what we're working towards. But again, if we can't get RSL in New South Wales to work as one, it's going to be a bigger challenge to get RSL nationally to work as one. But I think we can do it, and I remain positive about that. And obviously, I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't have the support of our board in doing so, both at state and national level. So that's a very important point. I've got one here. #BuyVeteran campaign is a step in the right direction supporting veterans. Good on you. That's good. And certainly I've seen that with, say, Indigenous communities and how they've been able to influence government expenditure and things like that. So that's a good point. Again, we need the advocacy, arms and legs in your Anzac House to do that sort of stuff. At the moment, we're with the resources we have, we can just keep a head above water in terms of compliance. So we need to work as one, as this plan suggested, so we can do those things. That's good. Aren't there also legal issues that prevent being one RSL, i.e. RSL Act? No, I don't believe so. The RSL Act is limiting, and this actually creates us as a statute under state legislation, which is the only state branch in that situation. It is a bit of a three-hump camel, I guess, that it pulls up not only the ACNC and the Fair Trading Act, but also requirements under ASIC. So very complicated, and certainly for those people who are considering a board role, there's a lot of reading to do around the accountabilities, but there's no legal impediment for us operating as one RSL. And when I say operating as one RSL, it doesn't mean that we don't have sub-branches. It just means the sub-branches, we collectively work as one. My view around the funding model, and we'll come to that shortly, is that we need to pool those resources in order for us to make strategic investment decisions to implement the initiatives that are in the plan, but also to continue to recognise that the wherewithal within our sub-branches is about helping veterans. It's hard to get the expertise to run large investment accounts and things like that. It's a challenge, and this is one way that we can overcome it. So no impediment there. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick bit of water, and we move on. Now move forward to the how do we fund it issue. I've spoken about the issue of funding being critical with presenting the plan. One might say that, geez, $20 million is a lot of money. We haven't got that sort of money to invest in such a change, such a strategic change. Well, I also put it to the membership, can we afford not to do it? Now, it's important that, and I've said this at many sub-branch consultations, that we recognise that the structure of RSL in New South Wales is the sub-branches are unincorporated associations that under the trust law, the assets of that sub-branch belongeth to the trust. Now, I've also learned from recent history that one wouldn't suggest that Anzac House would have the expertise or the breadth to go and assume any of the assets from the sub-branches. So what we're saying in this concept that's attached to the strategic plan for consultation is a concept of how a pooled investment would work. And as one of the questions that's already come in is around one of the funding working groups under the District President's Council that's been working on this. So in other words, what this was saying is that the sub-branches would invest, instead of investing at the moment as they do, many of them, and this figure is very conservative in terms of $243 million. Is actually a lot more than that, but I was just working on this as a concept. So at the moment, they're investing in various funds management organisations, getting advice, and the trustees taking advice and making a decision to invest. So instead of 60 or 70 sub-branches doing that independently and all paying the fees to those funds management people, we pool their investments. This would be no differently than this model here, and I think there's been a bit of a misconception, false assumptions made about that, because Anzac House is not a funds management business, neither do we have the expertise to do that, nor do we have a licence to do that. So it would be going to the market, and I have obviously done some work around that, and there are a number of the large investment fund management organisations recognising our charitable status could likely do that for no charge at all. Because they want to support the RSL and we can obviously promote them. It would provide an opportunity for the investing sub-branch to take a full spectrum of risk as they do now, no differently than that. The big difference though is what we're proposing here is the investors make a decision on the strategic disbursements required, including funding the strategic plan, perhaps funding the liaison officer at the National Centre for Veterans Health, perhaps funding a whole series of scholarships. At the moment, a lot of sub-branches do scholarships, but no one knows about it other than the local town or that sub-branch, whereas we can promote RSL as most prominent in the media, etc., if we're able to make those strategic decisions and strategic announcements. So very much making that strategic disbursement decision before providing the disbursements back to the investor. Obviously in here would be business rules around maintaining the asset pool above inflation, or at least equal to it, so we don't lose value for future generations. Obviously, there's other ways here of we're making direct contributions also to services, as we know with Defence Care now, with Life Care. What we're doing is pooling the donations in. We can see it live on the website, and then handing over to Life Care at the end of the year in a big check sense, so we can actually see that. And coming back the other way is performance reporting from Defence Care around where our investments are going. So this pooled investment model is just one way that we've proposed. To answer the question about the funding working group, their report has been received. Their terms of reference was to the board of Rsl New South Wales, not to me. So their report is being tabled this Wednesday. I can say that at this stage they're not supporting what I've outlined. They have proposed an alternative, but still it will not mean that we won't have an ability to do strategic disbursement. So I think it would be difficult, but that's a matter for the board. As I said, their report is being considered by the board. Other ways we could fund the strategic plan is through your Anzac House itself. We certainly don't have the resources in order to do the entire strategic plan, but certainly we've got options around some of our capital assets that could be used. It's not my advice. I think it's important that we preserve the capital for the people that follow us in the league. We're custodians of it at the moment, but it should, in my view, continue for another 100 years. So that's something that is a matter I've got to try and work out. But if we can't fund the strategic plan, regrettably, I can't see another outcome other than to reduce Anzac Houses further and perhaps consider some of those other options around particularly Rsl Queensland or Rsl Australia and how we go forward. But certainly I'd like to say that this strategic plan, let's work over the next 5 years to work together. So I'll pause there on the funding situation. Let's just see if we've got any questions that have come in. Okay, there's great work by all of Rsl New South Wales with the change. Are you looking at revising the Rsl badge? The last time it was changed was in 1990 when a smaller figure of a woman was added in a skirt. If Rsl New South Wales is looking at making the badge image relevant to 2020, i.e. women are equal. That certainly has come up in a number of the consultations around the logo or the trademark, the badge that's synonymous with the RSL. There has been, particularly younger people have said it needs to be more contemporary in its appearance and look, but overall the feedback has said no, keep the 1990 logo and badge as it is. But certainly if we get groundswell of support to change it, that's something we can certainly look at, but it will need to be done at a national level, keeping in mind that it is a brand that is owned by the national RSL. It's not owned by New South Wales or Victoria or the like. So it's a good question though. All right, have we got any questions on the funding model? That break was perfect to grab a coffee. Well timed, John. I like that. Oh, someone I surfed with. There we go. There's a few on the line. Okay, I can't read that fast. I've answered that. 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 Are we compliant supporting one not-for-profit organisation for another not-for-profit organisation? I'm not sure if I understand that question, but certainly compliance is an important issue. Anzac House, the state branch, was scrutinised, as we know, in 2017 by the ACNC, and we've had to put in place some pretty significant changes to ensure compliance, and it's the board's accountability to ensure that's up and across all the sub-branches, and we're working on that. I think there still needs to be investment in training and awareness, particularly those sub-branches who in the near future might choose to incorporate. That's something that we're very mindful of. That's a very critical part of the organisation. We haven't seen a lot of scrutiny at sub-branch level in terms of compliance, both as a not-for-profit fundraising entity and of course compliant with the RSL Constitution as well. It's important for us. Okay. All right, I don't think I've got any more questions at that point. Let me go back to my slides. Right, now this is coming back to, if you like, the summary. I'm really keen to know about what you think overall. What's missing? Is there something that is really sitting in your mind that needs to be considered? Should we implement this plan? And particularly if not, what should we do instead? I said at Congress last year, if we don't make changes, and given the current trajectory, particularly around membership, relevance to our community, what I call dying out with dignity strategy would have to be probably thought of as a course of action, so that we can legitimately close down the RSL over the next decade or so, as we pass to these new ESOs. Not particularly what I want to do, but certainly if the members tell me that we don't want to make these changes, these are some of the difficult decisions that we'll have to take. Our call for action is, as I said, get onto the website, make your submission, tell me what you think, hit me between the eyeballs, so we know exactly what's on your mind and what we need to do. Are we supporting this approach? Do you support the funding model approach? Are the things that are absent from the plan that we need to do? And obviously, notwithstanding the question I had before around the board's decision in October, I can't speak for the board, but time is precious on this. We really need to get a wriggle on to get some of these initiatives rolled out. In terms of the work so far in the final plan, I think what I'll need to be able to do is phase it more discreetly, so that we can align funding to it. In other words, if I can come up with some of the early wins initiatives that aren't dependent on other things, that we get moving on those things like the membership. But I think what we will need to do is get the overall structure right, saying that we are going to work as one, and that's what we really need the League to do. It's to focus on that, focus on our purpose of supporting the wider veteran community, not just our membership, and that's a challenge for us, but something I think we're certainly up for. It's fantastic going around to the sub-branches and seeing the amount of volunteer effort that goes in is extraordinary, something everyone should be proud of. And I think that's what will attract younger people to, seeing that we are actually doing things to support other people, being proactive around that, and it's something we should look to in the future. So, okay, let me go back to the live feed and see what questions we've got. It appears that those currently able to provide meaningful advice, feedback on the strategic plan are not those you are seeking to recruit into the League and thus the future. I know you've engaged with current serving members, but is this a chicken or the egg situation? To deliver the future, you need those currently involved to deliver what it looks like, which is perhaps against their wishes. The badges is a good example. The current members don't want to change, the future members in that they want to change. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a challenge. I have enjoyed the workshops we've done with the current serving people. Interestingly enough, a group of current serving, without exception, they only had heard of the RSL. They only thought of it as a club, not an organisation to support veterans. They had on their phones either Mates for Mates or Soldier On. They weren't aware of what the RSL does, what it stands for. So absolutely, that initiative in the strategic plan is essential, as is the strategic initiative about us working as one to connect with the ADF bases. I've used an anecdote of my youngest son who joined the infantry. I went to the passing out parade at Singleton after he finished his IET training, and when I arrived there, welcomed by usual army professionalism. There's a soldier on table, a legacy table, an open arms table, no sign of the RSL. The RSL, however, did provide an award, and the gentleman presented that award, then left. I spoke to the people on the base and they just rolled their eyes about the RSL. They said the RSL is more interested in itself, and identifying which of the neighbouring sub-branches is allowed to come and support the service people on that base. We've got to get past that. I think it's an organisation, a former military people. If we can't organise ourselves to have a coordinated effort to support each of our bases in New South Wales, we're doing something wrong, and that's in the plan. We've got a structure around district councils. Surely we can coordinate our presence both at that and at transition seminars. Is also important that we start to promote RSL as RSL. We don't have to concern ourselves with which sub-branch someone might join, because ultimately we're all in the same organisation here to support veterans. So that's an example. Okay, next one. The strategic plan is excellent in my view. I support it fully and I'm out after 33 years. I'm willing to help you. Give me a call. I like that. We've got a lot of people wanting to support this, and I think that it's a question, as I said, it has to be member power. It can't be something that's taken without the support of the membership, and I think that's something we've got to recognise as a member-based organisation, an organisation, as I said, was steamed in history and tradition, but at the same time we've got enormous resources that we can mobilise and really reassert ourselves as the leading charity. Okay, what else have I got? Well, that's it. I haven't answered one. Ooh. Recently I proposed a Veteran Week to the New South Wales Government survey webinar. This will showcase ESOs, veterans and their families for a full week across New South Wales. This will be held across regional New South Wales and showcase the needs of veterans, their families and also the value of veterans. This is similar to National Police Week. It will hopefully be part of New South Wales Government response to veterans. Yeah, that's a good point. We've been heavily engaged with the New South Wales Government in supporting their survey, because if someone else can fund the survey rather than us do, that's a good thing, but also to get the feedback. I think that point there was very interesting in the sense that what we don't realise is that many of the people who are leaving the Defence Force today are thankfully not broken, so to speak, and what we've seen is an emphasis on supporting those in need, which sometimes can cloud the community's views of people who have served. That said, of course, the 15%, as the data tells me, who are leaving Defence with an issue, whether a physical, mental or a combination of both, we absolutely need to support them and support them with all our strength. But at the same time, that 85% of people who have left, we need them to come and join us to help us support others. And what I'm seeing in some of the more senior membership of the RSL, what fantastic would be to have younger people to come in, learn the ropes, and then have a succession plan. It seems like the only succession plan we have at the moment is as a funeral, and we need to do more. We need to really support our senior people. Some people have been volunteering as sub-branch executives for decades. We need to support them and find those young people to come in to do so. I think it's a very good point, so thank you for that. Okay. No problems. I've seemed to have exhausted the questions. Have I? There's something there about the national. What are we currently engaging with DCO to get our message out? When I attended a DCO welcome visit in Sydney, it was like your son's passing out parade. RSL was notably missing. Are we missing opportunities considering you can engage not just with serving members, but the spouses who may be more concerned for the member than they are for themselves? Good point. Yes, I mentioned about the Joint Transition Authority. We've actually got an article going in Defence Family Matters, should be out in the next month actually, that I wanted to address that particular issue with the Defence Community Organisation. But you're dead set right. The only presence we've got at the transition seminar is RSL Defence Care, which is part of us, but at the same time, what about the RSL, the core RSL, an organisation that stands for veterans and can provide connection to services, but more particularly if we implement this plan, it's an organisation to connect for camaraderie and undertake events and things like that. And I was excited when I was in the eastern suburbs of Sydney recently at a sub-branch. They're already moving towards engagement around the sporting things that I'm recognising can happen. And whether it's barefoot lawn bowls, it's beach volleyball in that case, but there's a whole raft of things there that can be enjoyable. And what we all want to be able to see is sub-branches interacting with each other, moving within their districts, and ultimately, of course, in regional parts of New South Wales, that's going to be critical as we see dwindling numbers, particularly members. We need to get out there and positively engage the wider veteran community who are not necessarily members. If they're having fun and enjoying themselves, participating in activities, there's every likelihood they might want to join to help others, and that's what we can do. What interaction do you have with RSL National? Their website and social media haven't had an update since March 19. It seems they're very absent in providing the direction for organisation. Yeah, that's Rsl National. You might have read some of our board communiques. It's going through similar to what we are. Develop a strategic plan. At their meeting last week, they've agreed to a strategic plan. It's got 4 major themes. One is around advocacy. One is around the brand and management of the brand, and another around coordination, and one around services. Now, quite rightly, services are a domain of the states, but there is a coordination function at the national level. I've mentioned the importance of advocacy. Geez, we've got to do better than we do at the moment in Canberra, in my view. And certainly we don't have the resource at our Anzac House here in Sydney. And at the moment, for instance, we're working on a response to the parliamentary call for comment about the about to be established Commissioner for Defence and Veteran Suicide. What we've been able to do there is get the author based in Queensland to take input from our membership and have a really punchy, RSL response. It carries a lot of weight if we can speak with one voice. So to go back to the question, of course, is can we get that national to be more effective? And that needs to be done, as I said, as we need to move towards over maybe the next decade to a truly national organisation. We've moved beyond the federations, as I said, with modern technology, communications, and goodness knows what else, is surely we can do that. Importantly for me, though, is learning the lesson that the building block is the sub-branch, local delivery, engagement, but consistently. So you get the same experience wherever you are with a local flavour. Okay, what else have we got? I, for one, support this plan, including pooling our wealth, have our ageing membership want the status quo. This is the majority. Yeah, that's a challenge. So we need some loud, younger voices if we're going to make changes, because I think people are suspicious of change. I mentioned about the trust in the front office. We've got to get past that. So what we need to do is tell people the truth. We've got to start to tell people that we have a strong future ahead of us, but we need to work together. Most of the more senior members, the older members, have all served, understand the importance of collaboration and teamwork. And that's all we're suggesting in this plan, and we need to put aside any local parochialism and work together. But as I said, it's not one for me. This is the membership that need to believe in that vision, believe in the future, so they can start to do it. But at the moment, the voices of perhaps the more senior people are drowning out the younger people. It's good to receive those comments around the more recently serving people and the ones that are still serving, and that's what we're here for. So those challenges of change are before us right now. I've got another one here. What's an interesting name? What is the time frame for feedback? What is the cut-off date? The cut-off date is probably the end of the second week in October. In reality, I'm preparing the board papers now. I've got a series of papers going into the board meeting this week. And then obviously the big board meeting is the one at the end of October. So what I've been trying to do, and Mon sitting next to me, is activate a lot of social media to try and get some feedback. And I must say, on the social media front, it's probably some of the younger members who are being very positive, but at the same time I need to respect the more senior, older members, as that person just sent in to me. Next one. Do we set up a DCO liaison officer who then connects DCO events with local sub-branches? Oh yes, that's actually in the plan too. And I congratulate, I think it was East Maitland sub-branch who did that at the Williamtown base earlier this year, and I went along. They were trying to encourage other sub-branches to participate in that DCO event. We've also, in the strategic plan, there's an initiative specifically about that liaison with each of the major ADF bases based upon the district model. In the strategic plan, we fund a full-time secretary for each district, but we are also suggesting we need to shrink the number of districts, so there's a two-edged sword there. But we need to do that to support our volunteers to make sure that we can get those links and coordination onto the bases. Current transition seminars are online only and limited to 20 ESOs. I doubt we'd have a separate RSL stand, but why not a joint one? Absolutely, and that's exactly what I've been saying, is we need to operate as one so we can get in the door, and that's what certainly I've been trying to suggest to Defence and DBA, the benefits of having a lead ESO, if you like. I've also, in line with that, and I've been following two people who have been transitioning here in Sydney, filling in their new forms and how the new form looks. One thing I think we need in there is an opt-out. Because of the privacy, we can't ask for the data about their destination from when they leave, but what we can do is ask them to opt in to receiving correspondence from the RSL about what we can do in terms of supporting them as a transitioning veteran, but also obviously potentially then keeping them on our database so we can convince them to join, if not straight away, participate in events and the like. So that'll be good. How will RSL encourage more diversity for the board? Noting no women have nominated for the board. Is the succession planning for the board a will? Good point, though. You're right. It's we're fortunate one of the two independents is a woman, but no, I was disappointed to see no women nominated for the board. I don't think there's certainly no affirmative action, so to speak, if you will, regarding that. I think that we definitely need to continue to encourage women. I've been very pleased to see a lot of younger veterans want to join us once they knew about we're going to run sport and recreation events and activities. That was certainly appealing to them. So hopefully we can get those people also to move through the RSL ranks, if you will. As I said, that they can learn a lot from our existing sub-branch executives and move in and take those roles and hopefully take a role or to come onto the board. I have been contemplating recommending to the board that we need some sort of advisory group of younger people, diverse group of people, so we can get that input. As you're aware, under the new governance structure, the board has very much got its governance responsibilities, has to act in the interests of the entity, where the representative function comes from the DPC under the new Constitution. There's no reason, I don't think, why we can't have a younger advisory group as well. That's something that the board might consider next year around how do we tap into that great resource out there and inject some new ideas in terms of what we're doing. So good question, thank you. How will New South Wales, sorry, oh, it's that one, is it? Yeah. Okay, that's that one. That's it. I'm done. Okay, no more questions. Look, if you do have questions, please send them in on that link on the strategic plan at rslnewsouthwales.org.au. We'll come back to you, but I do encourage you to provide your feedback. No holds barred, straight between the eyes. But a huge thank you from me for joining us this afternoon. I hope there was some benefit, and if you provide Mon any feedback about the effectiveness of the webinar process, that would be great too. Certainly a big thank you from me for taking the time to join us. I've just been told there will be a recording of this available, so goodness knows what I've said. Anyway, thanks everyone. Please stay safe and thank you again for joining us this afternoon.